I lost my memory in 1989, so I don't remember high school. I don't remember anybody I went to school with. I don't remember my parents. I don't remember anything.
I lost my partner. This will be 6 years this August. My arms. I had 2 girls. Both of them passed away. I wasn't allowed to go to the funeral.
San Antonio has always been beautiful. But that was before these images began appearing on its streets.
Welcome to American Dream.
San Antonio is known around the world for the River Walk, the Alamo, and a downtown built to welcome visitors. But move away from the busiest tourist blocks, follow the highways beyond the restaurants and hotels, and another part of the city becomes harder to ignore. Tents appear beneath overpasses. People carry their belongings between sidewalks, transit stops, shelters, and outreach locations. Some have been outside for years. Others are experiencing homelessness for the first time. The latest published point-in-time count gives one measure of that reality. On a single night in January 2025, San Antonio and Bexar County counted 3,625 people experiencing homelessness. More than 1,100 were living outside rather than in shelters or temporary housing. The total was higher than the year before, but the increase among people living unsheltered was much sharper. A one-night count, however, cannot show how quickly people move into and out of homelessness during an entire year. By May 2026, San Antonio officials were describing a much more active cycle. During fiscal year 2025, more than 4,100 people had spent time living on the street. Outreach teams and service providers helped more than 2,800 reach shelter or housing. That represents thousands of individual exits from the street, and it shows that the local system is capable of helping people move toward greater stability. But another number explains why the crisis remains so visible. City officials said they were still seeing 1,327 people on the street. More than 600 people who had previously reached shelter or housing later returned to homelessness. At the same time, another 1,738 people entered homelessness for the first time. That is the contradiction at the center of San Antonio's crisis. People are leaving homelessness, but new people are arriving behind them. Imagine a shelter system as a room with 2 doors. Outreach workers, case managers, housing programs, and nonprofits are helping people move through the exit. But as long as households continue losing housing through the other door, the room never truly empties. A city can house thousands of people and still appear to be losing ground if new homelessness develops almost as quickly as the system can respond. This also changes the way the street should be understood. The person sleeping beneath an interstate today may not have been there a year ago. Someone carrying bags through downtown may still have a job. A family entering emergency shelter may have been paying rent only weeks earlier. The visible homeless population is not a fixed group of people permanently separated from the rest of the city. It is constantly changing. San Antonio has already built one of the most coordinated homeless response networks in Texas. The city has outreach teams, large shelter operations, nonprofit partners, housing programs, prevention services, and a new department dedicated specifically to homelessness strategy. Yet the city itself acknowledges that significant gaps remain. So the most important question is no longer simply why people are still sleeping outside. It is why so many new people continue reaching the point where they have nowhere else to go. To understand that the story has to move away from the tents and sidewalks for a moment, it has to begin inside the homes where people are still housed, still working, and still paying their bills, but increasingly have almost nothing left when something goes wrong. For many people in San Antonio, homelessness does not begin on a sidewalk. It begins months earlier, inside a home that is becoming harder to afford. The pressure can build quietly. Rent takes a larger share of the paycheck. Savings become smaller. Then, something ordinary goes wrong. Work hours are reduced. A car needs an expensive repair, or a medical bill arrives at the wrong time. None of these events automatically causes homelessness, but for a household already living close to the edge, there may be very little money left to absorb the shock. That financial pressure is visible across Bexar County. In 2024, more than 27,000 eviction cases were filed, affecting roughly 9 out of every 100 renter households. At the same time, local housing data shows how quickly the cost of owning or renting a home has moved beyond the growth of many household incomes. Between 2019 and 2023, median household income increased by about 18%, while home values rose by almost 50%. For someone with a strong financial cushion, those changes may simply mean spending less somewhere else. For a low-income household, the choices are much narrower. Rent still has to be paid. Food still has to be bought. Transportation is still necessary to reach work. When there is no money left after those basic expenses, one setback can begin a chain that becomes increasingly difficult to stop. A missed payment can lead to late fees. Falling behind can lead to an eviction notice. Once a person loses stable housing, keeping everything else together becomes harder. Sleep becomes less reliable. Transportation becomes more complicated. Important documents have to be carried or stored somewhere. Even keeping a job can become difficult when every morning begins with finding a restroom, charging a phone, protecting belongings, and figuring out where to spend the next night. This is also why homelessness cannot be explained only through addiction or mental illness. Those challenges are real for part of the homeless population, but they often exist alongside housing and financial instability rather than replacing them as an explanation. A person may manage a health condition for years while working and living in a stable home. Once that stability disappears, staying connected to medication treatment, appointments, and support becomes much more difficult. Family problems can create the same kind of sudden break. Someone leaving an unsafe home may be protecting themselves while also losing access to housing, shared income, transportation, or relatives who once provided support. Another person may have been staying temporarily with friends until that arrangement could no longer continue. In each case, the final move onto the street may look sudden, even though the pressure had been building for months. That is what makes prevention so important in San Antonio. The cheapest and least disruptive point to address homelessness is often before a person becomes homeless at all. A relatively small amount of rental assistance, help resolving an eviction, or temporary financial support may keep someone inside a home before the problem expands into shelter stays, lost employment, health problems, and months of instability. But once housing is gone, financial pressure is no longer the only challenge. For many people living outside, maintaining physical and mental health becomes another daily struggle, and conditions that were once manageable can become much harder to control. That is where the next part of San Antonio's crisis begins. Losing a home does more than change where a person sleeps. It can also remove many of the routines that make a health condition easier to manage. A person who once had a quiet room, a regular place for medication, a working phone, and a predictable way to reach appointments may lose all of those things at the same time. Outside sleep is often interrupted, belongings have to be protected, transportation becomes less reliable, and even keeping track of the next appointment can require more effort. A condition that was manageable while someone was housed can become much harder to control after that stability disappears. The latest official point-in-time summary for San Antonio and Bexar County shows how important this issue has become. In the 2025 count, more than 1,000 adults experiencing homelessness were identified as living with a serious mental illness. About 140 of them were counted outside, rather than in shelter. These figures do not mean that mental illness explains homelessness for everyone. They show that a significant number of people are trying to solve a housing crisis while also managing a serious health condition. That combination can create a difficult cycle. Someone may need regular care to become stable enough to complete housing applications, keep appointments, or return to work. But receiving consistent care becomes more difficult when there is no permanent address, no reliable transportation, and no safe place to recover after a difficult day. The longer someone remains outside, the harder it may become to rebuild the routines that treatment depends on. San Antonio has tried to bring some of that care closer to people living outside. The city's street outreach system now includes clinical coordination by licensed social workers and professional counselors. Their role is not only to meet people where they are, but also to connect them with longer-term mental health care and with shelter or housing when those options are available. City outreach specialists are assigned across San Antonio and return regularly to people who may not be ready or able to accept help during the first conversation. That repeated contact matters because recovery rarely follows a straight line. A person who misses one appointment has not necessarily rejected treatment. A person who remains outside after speaking with an outreach worker has not necessarily rejected housing. Sometimes, the next step depends on transportation, paperwork, an available bed, or simply enough trust to believe that the offer will lead somewhere more stable. This is why mental health care and housing cannot be separated easily. Treatment may help someone regain stability, but returning from that treatment to the same uncertain sleeping conditions can make progress difficult to maintain. Housing provides safety and routine, but some people also need continuing support after they move indoors. For San Antonio, the challenge is therefore not simply to make services exist on paper. It is to keep those services connected long enough for a person to move from the street into a more stable life. And that leads to another difficult question. If help is available, why are more than 1,000 people still sleeping outside? Even with shelters, outreach teams, and service programs operating across San Antonio, more than 1,000 people were still counted outside in the latest point-in-time report. That can create a simple question for people who pass the same tents or sleeping areas each day. If help exists, why are so many people still outside? Part of the answer is capacity. A shelter system can only accept as many people as it has space for. And San Antonio has already acknowledged that the current network does not have enough room for everyone who needs it. In its planning for 2026, the city identified a need for hundreds of additional emergency shelter beds. Until that gap is closed, some people may be willing to move indoors and still have no permanent opening available when they need one. But an available bed on paper does not always mean the entire process is simple from the street. Someone may need transportation to reach the facility. They may need identification or other documents for the next stage of a program. A person with limited mobility may have difficulty moving across the city. Someone carrying nearly everything they own may also be thinking about where those belongings can be stored while they are inside. For people who have spent a long time outdoors, trust can become another barrier. Outreach workers may return to the same person several times before that person accepts an offer of help. That does not necessarily mean the person prefers sleeping outside. It can mean they are trying to understand where they are being taken, how long they can remain there, what happens afterward, and whether the offer will actually move them closer to stable housing. San Antonio's approach increasingly recognizes that difference. The city's outreach teams are assigned across the community and are expected to build relationships over time rather than treating a single conversation as the end of the process. They can connect people with food, water, clothing, medical care, and housing resources while continuing to work toward an indoor placement. Haven for Hope also operates a low-barrier South Campus designed to provide indoor sleeping and access to broader services without requiring every problem in a person's life to be resolved before they can enter. This matters because emergency shelter works best when it becomes the beginning of a path toward stability rather than simply a different place to spend the night. San Antonio has also shown that barriers can be reduced when circumstances become urgent. During periods of severe winter weather, the city has opened additional temporary overnight spaces, provided transportation and coordinated accommodations for people with pets. Those emergency efforts demonstrate that some obstacles can be solved when agencies have enough capacity and flexibility. The larger challenge is making that level of access available throughout the year. For someone living outside, the most useful offer is not simply a bed for one night. It is a realistic next step, somewhere safe to sleep, a way to keep important belongings secure, help replacing missing documents, access to care when needed, and a clear route toward longer-term housing. Without that next step, temporary shelter can reduce immediate hardship without ending homelessness itself. And when more people remain outside than the system can permanently accommodate, the consequences eventually extend beyond individual survival. Sidewalks, underpasses, parks, and other public spaces begin carrying pressures that affect the entire community. That is where San Antonio faces its next difficult balance, protecting shared public spaces while still recognizing why some residents have nowhere private to go. One of the less visible changes in San Antonio's homelessness crisis is happening among older adults. Many of them do not fit the image people often associate with life on the street. Some spent decades working, paying rent, raising families, and living independently before their financial situation became too difficult to maintain. In the 2025 point-in-time count, more than 700 people experiencing homelessness in San Antonio and Bexar County were age 55 or older. That number matters because aging changes almost every part of what it means to live without stable housing. A situation that is exhausting for a younger adult can become far more difficult for someone dealing with reduced mobility, ongoing medical needs, or a fixed income that no longer keeps pace with housing costs. For some older residents, homelessness can begin with surprisingly ordinary changes. Retirement income remains nearly the same while rent increases. A spouse who once shared household expenses is no longer there. Medical costs take a larger share of the monthly budget. A vehicle stops working, making transportation more expensive. When savings are already limited, there may be no easy way to replace the income or support that has been lost. Once an older person loses housing, rebuilding stability can take longer. Finding a restroom, carrying belongings waiting for transportation, or moving between service locations can require more physical effort than it once did. Regular medical care may also become harder to maintain when there is no permanent place to rest, store medication, or receive important paperwork. The problem is not simply age. It is what happens when aging, limited income, health needs, and housing instability arrive at the same time. San Antonio has begun responding to that difference, rather than treating every person experiencing homelessness as though they need the same type of assistance. Haven for Hope, for example, developed its Young at Heart program for adults age 65 and older. The program focuses on helping participants organize documents, connect with income and health services, and move toward appropriate housing. That approach reflects an important lesson. An older adult who has spent decades living independently may not need an entirely new life. They may need affordable housing, reliable medical care, help navigating benefits, and enough continuing support to remain stable. The challenge will become more important as the population ages. If housing costs continue to rise faster than fixed incomes, more older residents may find themselves trying to stretch limited resources across rent, food, transportation, and healthcare. For a city that creates a choice, it can wait until an older resident loses housing and then respond with emergency services, or it can recognize the warning signs earlier and protect the stability that person still has. Because for someone in their 60s or 70s, losing a home is not simply losing an address. It can mean losing the routines and independence built over an entire lifetime. And as more people are forced to manage daily life in public spaces, San Antonio faces another question that affects both those living outside and the wider community. How can the city keep shared streets clean and usable without simply moving the same hardship from one block to another? When hundreds of people are living outside for long periods of time, homelessness eventually becomes more than a housing issue. It also becomes a question about how public spaces are shared. In San Antonio, sidewalks, underpasses, drainage areas, parks, and vacant spaces can become temporary living areas when people have nowhere private to go. Belongings accumulate because there is no storage. Waste becomes harder to manage when restrooms and regular sanitation services are limited. For nearby residents and businesses, these conditions can make public areas more difficult to use. For people living outside the same spaces, may be the only places where they can sleep, stay near transportation, and remain connected to outreach services. San Antonio responds to these situations through a coordinated encampment process. When a location is reported, city teams assess whether there are health or safety concerns. Outreach workers also visit the site to offer connections to shelter, transportation, and other services. When officials determine that a site needs to be cleared, people living there generally receive 48 hours of notice before the operation takes place. The scale of this work shows how often the same problem appears across the city. During fiscal year 2025, San Antonio recorded 1,369 encampment abatements. City crews removed more than 2,568 tons of material, while the average direct cost was just over $2,000 for each site. For fiscal year 2026, the city again set a goal of completing at least 1,300 abatements. Those operations can restore a sidewalk, park, or underpass to public use. But they also reveal the difference between cleaning a location and ending homelessness. A site can be cleared in a day. Finding stable housing may take far longer. If someone receives shelter or housing during that process, the cleanup can become part of a real transition away from the street. If no appropriate placement is available, however, the person still has to find somewhere else to sleep. The visible problem may disappear from one block while continuing somewhere nearby. That is why San Antonio's own approach combines cleanup operations with outreach. The city recognizes that removing belongings from a public space cannot by itself solve the reason someone was living there. Outreach specialists continue meeting people outside, building trust, and connecting them with food, water, medical care, shelter, and housing resources. This creates a difficult balance for any growing city. Residents should be able to use sidewalks and parks safely. Businesses should be able to operate in clean and accessible surroundings. At the same time, people without stable housing still need somewhere to exist while they wait for a realistic indoor option. The long-term solution, therefore, cannot be measured only by how many sites are cleared. A more meaningful measure is what happens afterward. If fewer people return to outdoor living because more shelter beds, housing options, and support services are available, public spaces improve naturally. But if the number of people needing help remains larger than the number of places available to them, the same pressure will continue to appear in different locations. San Antonio can keep responding to what is visible on the street. The harder task is building enough capacity so that fewer people need to live there in the first place. And that brings the story to the programs, investments, and policies the city is now using to try to close that gap. San Antonio's response to homelessness is beginning to move beyond the idea that one program can solve every part of the problem. Emergency shelter matters because someone living outside may need a safe place that same night. But a temporary bed cannot replace a permanent home, and permanent housing alone may not be enough for someone who also needs continuing medical care, help managing benefits, or support returning to work. The challenge is connecting these steps so that progress does not end when one program ends. That is the purpose behind permanent supportive housing. Instead of asking someone to become completely stable before receiving a home, the approach provides housing first and then connects the resident with services that can help them remain there. In January 2026, San Antonio opened 425 San Pedro Apartments. The development contains 80 affordable homes, including 25 permanent supportive housing units for people leaving homelessness. Residents in those units can also receive on-site support intended to help them maintain long-term housing stability. For an older adult who has spent months moving between temporary locations, the value of that model is easy to understand. A permanent address means important documents have somewhere to arrive. Medication can be stored safely. Appointments can be planned from the same location each week. Benefits can be managed more consistently. Most importantly, the person no longer has to spend much of each day solving the immediate question of where to sleep that night. San Antonio is also expanding this approach for older residents. Town Twin Village added 41 new homes in 2025 and is designed to eventually provide more than 200 homes for adults age 55 and older who have experienced long periods without stable housing. The project reflects a larger city goal of developing 1,000 permanent supportive housing units by 2031. But building housing for people who are already homeless addresses only one side of the crisis. San Antonio is also investing in housing that can prevent more households from reaching that point. In April 2026, the City Council approved $20.7 million for 8 affordable housing developments expected to preserve or create 576 homes. The projects are intended to serve families, older adults, veterans, young people at risk of homelessness, and other residents who may struggle to keep up with local housing costs. This distinction is important because prevention and recovery do different jobs. Emergency shelter protects someone during an immediate housing crisis. Supportive housing helps a person who needs longer-term stability. Rental assistance and affordable housing can prevent a household from losing its home in the first place. If any one of those pieces is missing, people can continue moving through the system without ever reaching lasting stability. There is also a practical lesson here for younger people beginning their own adult lives. Homelessness rarely begins with someone planning to live outside. Financial stability can weaken gradually through rising expenses, reduced income, unexpected bills, or the loss of family support. Keeping identification documents, secure understanding rental agreements, building even a small emergency fund, when possible, asking for assistance before missed payments accumulate, and staying connected to trusted family or community support can make a real difference when life becomes difficult. The same lesson applies to communities. Waiting until someone has already lost housing is usually more complicated than helping earlier. Once a person is outside the city, may need to provide shelter, outreach, transportation, health services, document recovery, case management, and eventually housing. Preventing that loss of housing can sometimes require far less. San Antonio's own rental assistance program reflects that idea. Although available funding is limited and assistance is not guaranteed, the program is designed for renters already facing financial hardship and requires applicants to provide documentation showing that their housing is at immediate risk. That means timing matters. Learning where help exists before a crisis becomes irreversible can be just as important as knowing where to go afterward. The larger lesson from San Antonio is that homelessness cannot be reduced only by responding to what appears on the street. A city needs places for people to go tonight, permanent homes they can move into later, and enough support upstream to keep other households from losing housing tomorrow. San Antonio has begun building all 3 parts of that path. The programs are not large enough yet to meet every need, and new housing takes time to complete. But they show what lasting progress should eventually look like. Fewer people entering homelessness, more people reaching permanent housing, and fewer returning to the street after they have received help. That is a very different measure of success from simply counting how many tents disappeared from view. The real measure is whether people remain housed after the crisis has passed. San Antonio's homelessness crisis cannot be understood only by looking at the people visible on sidewalks or beneath overpasses. The deeper story begins much earlier, when housing costs rise beyond what a household can comfortably manage, when savings disappear, or when a personal setback becomes too absorb. By the time someone is sleeping outside, Many of the easiest opportunities to prevent that outcome may already have passed. That is one of the clearest lessons from this city. Homelessness is easier to prevent than to reverse. A household that needs temporary help with rent may require relatively limited support. After housing is lost, the same person may need emergency shelter, transportation, replacement documents, healthcare, employment assistance, and months of help finding another affordable home. The longer instability continues, the more difficult ordinary parts of life can become. This is also why the public should be careful about judging homelessness from a brief encounter on the street. A person sitting beside a shopping cart does not reveal how they arrived there. Someone may have lost work, experienced a family crisis, developed health problems, or reached retirement with an income that no longer covered housing. Others may need additional support before they can return to a stable routine. Different paths into homelessness require different paths out. For younger people, there is an important lesson here as well. Housing stability should never be taken for granted. Learning how rent agreements work, keeping identification and financial documents secure, protecting credit when possible, building even a small emergency reserve, and asking for help early can reduce the damage caused by an unexpected setback. Financial problems often become more difficult when they are ignored until the final notice arrives. But personal preparation has limits. No amount of careful budgeting can create an affordable apartment where too few exist. A person cannot use a shelter bed that is already full, and someone who needs continuing support cannot maintain stability if that support disappears immediately after housing is found. Individual responsibility matters, but communities also shape the choices people actually have. That is why San Antonio's next stage cannot be measured only by how much money is announced or how many programs exist. The more useful questions are practical. Are fewer people losing housing for the first time? Are people who receive help remaining housed? Can someone reach shelter when they need it? Does temporary assistance lead toward a permanent home? And are older adults, families, people with disabilities, and others facing additional barriers able to use the system without becoming lost inside it? These measurements matter because a city can become very efficient at responding to homelessness without actually reducing it. A shelter can be full every night and still leave people outside. Outreach teams can make thousands of contacts, while affordable housing remains difficult to find. Public spaces can be restored and later face the same pressure again. Each action may be necessary, but lasting progress appears only when fewer people need those emergency responses in the first place. San Antonio already has something many communities spend years trying to build: organizations that work together, experienced outreach teams, major shelter capacity, new housing projects, prevention programs, and growing recognition that housing, health, and long-term stability are connected. The challenge now is turning that network into a path people can actually complete. For someone living outside, success is not another referral. It is reaching a door that opens and knowing there is a realistic next step after entering. For a household struggling to remain housed, success may be even less visible. It may simply mean that an eviction never happens, a child never has to leave a familiar bedroom, and a worker never has to figure out how to keep a job while sleeping somewhere temporary. Those stories will never appear in an encampment count because homelessness was prevented before it became visible. And perhaps that is the most important measure of progress. A successful city is not one that becomes better at hiding homelessness from public view. It is one that steadily reduces the number of people who have to experience it at all. San Antonio has not reached that point yet, but every person who remains housed, every older resident who reaches a stable home, and every person who moves from temporary help into lasting independence brings the city closer. The lesson is simple enough to carry beyond San Antonio. Respond early, judge people carefully, protect housing stability when possible, and remember that temporary help works best when it leads somewhere permanent. Thank you for staying with this documentary until the end. If these stories help you see homelessness with greater understanding, share your perspective in the comments and subscribe as we continue examining the challenges facing communities across America. This documentary examines homelessness as a public health, housing, and community issue. The experiences shown here are presented for educational and informational purposes and are not intended to promote harmful behavior. Our goal is to better understand the circumstances that lead people to the streets and the approaches that may help them move toward health, housing, recovery, and long-term stability.